This story happened a few years ago. I was in my early 20s and studying in Paris, France. I was going home from university. I usually took a short bus ride and walked the rest of the way. That day, I felt slightly uncomfortable. I could sense some guy looking intensely at me. I was used to unpleasant, unsolicited gazes, but this time, his gaze felt beastly. It's hard to explain why, but I felt like a prey being stalked. I decided to get off the bus a few stops early. I wanted to avoid him and didn't want him to see where I usually got off. Like I learned in the movies, I waited until someone else pressed the stop button and waited until the last moment to stand up and leave. I didn't notice him getting off the bus. Just as I was feeling the relief of having escaped an uncomfortable situation, I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, a few meters behind. I walked into his shop, took my phone, and pretended to be taking a call. When I couldn't see him anymore, I exited and made my way home as fast as I could. I kept looking back in the busy street. I zigzagged and crossed the street at every crossing. Finally, I believed that him getting off at the same stop as me was just a coincidence. When I reached my building, I looked back one last time, and there he was. His alarming gaze on me, smirking. I ran up to my apartment, climbing the stairs 4 at a time. I reached the top floor, squeezed through my door, locked it, and froze. My intercom was ringing. Don't ask me why I picked it up. I regretted it the moment I did. I could hear the opposite flat intercom ringing as well. He had pressed all the buttons one by one, hoping someone would open, but now he knew my name. Gabrielle? I felt like a deer in the headlights, frozen. Open the door, please, said a pleading voice. I just want to talk to you. Somehow I couldn't move or speak. Come to the window, he added. Look at me, you'll see. I'm not a bad guy. Something clicked. He wanted to locate my apartment in the building. I was not going to make that mistake. I hung up in shock. I waited by the door without moving for what seemed like hours. When I finally managed to calm myself down, I called my long-distance boyfriend. Call the police, he said immediately. Why didn't I call the police? I don't know. Today, it would be the first thing I would do. The fear of making a big deal out of something not important, perhaps. What an idiot I was. I called my best friend instead. I didn't want to feel alone. I told her all about it, and after a while I felt better, safe. We started laughing, then suddenly, the intercom rang again. 2 hours had passed since I'd come home. I answered. Gabrielle, said the voice. Open, please. I still remember the chills I felt. He was still there. He was there all this time. I was silent, petrified. He was silent, but I could sense his trepidation. Gabrielle, let me in. I'm so thirsty, he said. Just give me a glass of water. This broke the tension. I hung up. Curled up in a corner, literally in a recovery position, terrified, I waited. I was scared to make a sound. I knew he couldn't hear me from the hall, but I was scared even to breathe. The intercom rang again, and again, and again, but I didn't answer this time. I crouched to the sofa and fell asleep in exhaustion. I heard the intercom ring one more time in the middle of the night. I woke up in the morning, afraid to leave my apartment. I called my dad, who came to pick me up. There was no one in the hall, but there was a note in my mailbox. Gabrielle, I'm a nice guy. You should have opened up to me. We immediately went to the nearest police station. The police listened and of course told me that I should not hesitate to call them. My dad called a locksmith to install digicode on the building door the same day and wrote a message to each of my neighbors asking them to not open the door to anyone they didn't expect. He sat in the cafe in front of my building with 2 friends every morning for more than a week. I never saw the stalker again. After this episode, I used a different route to and from university every day. I kept my phone tightly in my hand and looked back every few meters. Today, I am still very observant of my surroundings. I never answer the door if I am not expecting someone. For 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was going to move back to Ireland, my friend and I were at my house having dinner and drinking a little. I was renting an apartment in the city, and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I'm 20. That night, my roommate left to go have dinner with her friends. About a minute after she left, someone buzzed our door to be let in the building. I looked at the camera and didn't recognize the woman. She looked to be in her late 20s to early 30s, so I just assumed it was one of my roommates and that she was coming to meet her. I buzzed her into the building, assuming they would meet in the lobby. At first, I didn't buzz her in because I didn't recognize her, and she walked away from the door. But then I hit the buzzer as soon as she walked away, and then I, myself, walked away from the camera, meaning I couldn't see if she actually entered or not, assuming that if she didn't enter, she would just call or text my roommate. Boy, was I wrong. This woman came up to my apartment building on the 6th floor. She came up just 2 minutes after my roommate left, so I know she didn't take the stairs, and I know they must have seen each other when my roommate got off the lift and the lady got on. Realizing that this was weird, I did not open the door when she rang it. I looked through the peephole just to confirm that it was nobody I knew. At this point, I backed away from the door and gestured for my friend to be silent. We crept back to my room, which was at the far side of the apartment, and I began calling my roommate, who wasn't picking up. Meanwhile, the lady was incessantly ringing my door. My roommate was not picking up, and my friend was just telling me to open my door. In her mind, it was a woman, so she must be harmless, but I told her she was an idiot for underestimating the female sex. Women can be criminals too. She kept telling me to open the door and I refused. The door kept ringing, and I kept looking out of the peephole. At this point, I understood that if she knew my roommate or was looking for someone specific, she would just call or text them. She didn't take out her phone at all. She just stayed eerily silent, didn't call out any names or ask if anyone was home. This was weird to me. I finally got through to my roommate. She said she wasn't expecting anyone and that she doesn't know anyone in that age range. Now it had been at least 20 minutes. I knew the lady knew someone was home because the lights were on, and my understanding is that's why she wasn't leaving. I continued watching her through the peephole and saw her go into the lift for a minute and then come back out again. The lift was really loud and I would hear it move. It didn't. She just went in and came out. In my mind, this meant someone in the lift was waiting for her. After about 40 minutes, the woman finally left. I ran to our hall and flicked on the outside camera. The lady left the building with 2 men. They all had backpacks on. I will be eternally grateful for trusting my instincts and not listening to my friend. Sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. This happened a few months ago in the McDonald's at Copenhagen Station. I am not Danish, only visiting the country for 1 day, and since I wanted to travel cheap, I decided to take the cheapest bus there, which just so happened to be the one arriving at 11 p.m. the day before. I thought I could save even more money by not renting a bed somewhere, and instead spending the night awake at the station, do my business the next day, and sleep long and well on the bus ride back home. So this McDonald's was open 24/7. I pretty early discovered that the station was too cold for me to get some shut-eye, so I went inside and bought a coffee and sat down at an empty table. Plenty of lighting and semi-drunk people to keep me awake, I thought. I should add that I'm 23 and a female. After some while of sitting in my spot, a strange guy walked over and placed a cup full of soda on my table. He said in Danish something that I believe meant, "I ate my food already. I didn't drink any. You should have it instead." I am Swedish, and although some Swedes understand Danish perfectly well, I have some difficulties doing so this was just a guess. Anyway, I didn't really pay much attention to the cup after it was put on my table, just wrote it off as a random drunk guy trying to flirt. But I noticed that in front of me a table away sat another guy, and he was watching me closely, because we locked eyes the times I would look up and peek at him. This creeped me out. I really didn't like being watched like this, and he just sat there for nearly an hour, even though he had no food in front of him. In the end, this dude stood up and walked over to me, and I cursed internally, thinking I'd have to defend myself and tell him to leave. But he turned, and there stood the guy that had left the soda cup on my table. He told the soda guy to leave, after pushing the soda cup back into his arms, and that he didn't want to see him anywhere near this place again. Then he turned to me and explained in English that the soda guy had walked by my table several times, glancing at me and the cup and probably waiting for me to drink it. He said he'd finished his meal a while ago and just stayed to watch over me, but had to leave and reminded me to be careful. I hadn't even noticed the soda guy supposedly pacing by. I was too fixated on this other dude, who just so happened to be the good guy watching over me. Who knows what was in that soda, and what would have happened if I had gotten really thirsty and drank some of it.